Welcome to Wake Up to Your Life. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Colleen Odegaard. Our topic today is a difficult one, but it's also critical that we speak about it. We're talking about mental health and suicide, the importance of speaking openly about our mental health and our struggles and what's really going on. My guest today is Matt Simon. He's a therapist and he's the COO of New Hope Treatment Centers. He's currently working on a documentary featuring real-life stories from survivors, people who have struggled, and speaking in their own words. It's going to be a very powerful film for sure. And Matt's hope is simple, but it is profound, that the more we talk about this, the more lives we may be able to save. This conversation, I hope, Matt, will be honest and emotional, and I'm just grateful that you agreed to say yes and be here today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Colleen, so much.
Let's start with the film, The Calm and the Storm. What inspired you to create this?
There's a lot of different inspirations for the film, and so I've been a therapist for almost 20 years, and so I've worked with incredible folks. Most of my career has been kind of focused on young people and adolescents and their families. So sadly, I've worked with folks who've struggled with depression and suicide, and I've lost young people to suicide during my career. And so it's not a topic that's unfamiliar to me. And in some ways, it almost started to become desensitized to it to a degree. But then having some conversations actually with April Simpkins this past fall. April is the mother of Chesley Kryst, who was the former Miss USA, who tragically died by suicide. And that conversation with April kind of triggered something new in me that was really interesting. And April is a phenomenal person who obviously did not plan on becoming some mental health advocate, and now is just this absolute force to be reckoned with. But she said, and her hope is that in her lifetime, what she would love to see is that the topic of suicide and depression kind of goes the way of what breast cancer has done in our society, which, in her lifetime, when she was a young person, you didn't talk about breast cancer. You didn't even say the word breast in common, kind of conversation. And now we celebrate it. It's a cultural kind of institution. October, you're going to have NFL football players wearing pink out on the NFL, and that happened because of these kind of cultural breakthrough moments, but it's not been that way forever. And so that kind of thought of 5Ks and 10Ks and this kind of just normalization of this issue as another healthcare issue, as another pressing public health issue, that really resonated. And I said, okay, I think that actually I could see that happening in my lifetime. To do that, though, we need to have some cultural breakthrough moments. That did not happen to breast cancer because of healthcare conferences where doctors just talk to other doctors. That happened because normal people got involved, and we kind of had this cultural reckoning where it's okay to talk about this. And even moving beyond that, it's actually okay to celebrate the fight and the recovery. And so that just really clicked in my mind. I was like, okay, I think there's something there. And then the power of film, particularly documentary film, where it actually reflects real life, I think has the ability to kind of move the needle and break through to culture. So those two things kind of colliding, and then there was a little bit of a third one we'll probably get into around 988. But that conversation with April was really the inspiration point.
I love what she's done and being so public and talking about what happened with her daughter, talking about her daughter taking her own life. And because I think that you're right too, is that the more we talk about this and normalize those feelings of depression, of being so sad that you think you can't go on, right, it helps other people to go, oh, really, you too? And maybe they will seek help, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I had a friend who, we released our trailer, or a teaser for the movie recently, and she reached out and was very sweet and was moved by the trailer. And she mentioned that when her teenage daughter was going through some bouts with severe depression, and she had to go to the hospital a couple times, she said, during that time, if her daughter had been hospitalized for a physical ailment, she would have talked to her friends, she probably would have talked to her church members, people would have brought her over casseroles, it would have been this kind of rallying moment. But because her daughter was hospitalized for depression, it was not something that was talked about. So she, even just as a parent, as someone trying to help their loved one through that, had to kind of shoulder that alone. So sometimes even the support systems have to all shoulder it alone, because it's this kind of shame and stigma. And if we get to the other side of that, where this is an illness like other illnesses, and we rally around things like this, no matter what, whether it's an illness you can see or one you can't see, we will be in such a better place as a culture.
What are some statistics regarding suicide that you think would shock most people?
I think the fact that we lose twice as many people to suicide every year as we do to homicides is probably a shocking one. It's about, we lose on average around 50,000 Americans, and not even just talking globally is a whole different ballgame, because this is not just an American problem, although there are some kind of slivers to it that are uniquely American. But we lose about 50,000 people a year to suicide, and only about 25,000 people a year to homicide. If you watch the news, that is probably not what people would necessarily think, right? Suicide claims more lives than most other public health issues like cancer and even like car accidents and things like that. Just from a pure number standpoint, that's not also factoring in suicide attempts and folks who are unsuccessful. So the data is a little hard to break down, but it averages out about every 11 to 15 seconds someone is making a suicide attempt in the United States.
That is shocking to me, Matt.
I think
That
that's
is
just kind of
so
overwhelming.
shocking.
Some of the suicide statistics around veterans remain really troubling, because even it's such a small population within our country, so it's such a disproportionate stat related to, but we lose anywhere between 15 to 20 veterans every day to suicide. There's just some, so the pure number, and I think it's less about the numbers, but it's the numbers in relation to the amount of energy that the issue gets. So we're not ever downplaying some of these other issues. But what we are saying is they get their just cause and time and attention as a culture, and as our public health institutions focus on them rightly. But suicide is right up there, and in some cases has more numbers than these other issues that are getting 5 times as much attention or focus or research or things like that. So that's the big disconnect.
And again, a lot of the reason why behind the documentary, and why you're talking about it again, the more we can speak of it, and maybe I'm a little bit out of touch because I am used to talking about it. One of my oldest friends, Lisa, she lives in San Jose, California, where I grew up. 10 years ago, her 18-year-old son took his own life, and it was the most awful. Well, and you can, all of us can imagine that, right? You think, how would you go on? And so I'm used to talking about that. And something she would always tell me is that to say to people, she's also a therapist, by the way, which you can imagine the shame she felt, which she didn't need to, but thinking, I'm a mental health professional, and my 18-year-old son, I did not know he was struggling like this, and he took his own life. And she would say to me, talk to people when they're suffering, and actually ask, do you think of hurting yourself? And I think that that's something that we think, well, why would I say that? I don't want to put an idea in someone's brain. But she would tell me that because people who are in that state and are thinking about the possibility of ending their own life, they have, you're not giving them that idea. They've
Right.
already had it. And
Yes.
and do you agree with that? Is that a proper thing to do?
1,000%. Yeah, that's actually been that kind of fear of that you're going to plant something, that kind of like social contagion fear, has actually been thoroughly debunked by the research and the data. And I think it's more rooted in our own just anxiety and avoidance of the topic. But yeah, if anybody actually has any fear, if what's stopping you from asking somebody, are you thinking of hurting yourself, or just are you really doing okay, versus just how are you doing and everybody says fine, but really leaning in, if you think that that's somehow going to make things worse, the data does not bear that out at all. If anything, statistically and even just anecdotally, folks that we're talking to with the film, and just folks I've known throughout my life and career, people who've survived attempts, often say a couple things. They do say that part of their brain was hoping somebody was going to say something. And then most of them say they felt an immediate relief that it wasn't successful, or a regret that they were about to do it. And one of a person who's become a good friend, and some of the folks in the audience might know, Kevin Hines is a really famous mental health advocate, and Kevin survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge 27 years ago now. and he's done such incredible advocacy work, but he tells his story, and as he was kind of doing that long walk, and he kind of, he knew what he was going to do, he kept on running into people, and he just kept on like praying that one of these people are going to say something to stop. And there was one last person before he got to the bridge who was like, hey, and kind of reached down and touched his shoulder, and he's like, okay, maybe this is the person. And that person said, hey, do you mind taking a picture of me? And I took a picture. Of course, I'm not putting it on anybody else, but
No,
it
of
is.
course not. No,
there is some. No, like there's also some interesting even data around therapists that therapists avoid the word suicide. We kind of tiptoe around it, or you lead people to say like, hey, you're not actually thinking about hurting yourself, right? You're not that sad, because again, we just as human beings, I think we struggle with that kind of avoidance. But no, the data says you actually, what's best is to lean in directly. And most of the time, those people, if they're really struggling, they will feel a tremendous sense of relief.
Yes. Oh, Matt, that's really something. We'll take a break right now, continue this conversation more on ways we can help and what to do if you're struggling yourself. You are watching Wake Up to Your Life. Welcome back to Wake Up to Your Life. My guest today is Matt Simon, the COO of New Hope Treatment Centers. Matt, powerful stuff you were talking about right before the break. And it led me to think of something that I hear people say a lot when it comes to suicide. I remember when I used to live in Ballantyne, I was raising my family out there, and a woman in our community took her own life. And she was a mom, and, we all sort of knew who the family was. And I heard so many people say, that's so selfish. To kill yourself is so selfish. How could you do that to your kids? And how could you do that to your family? And I think there was a time in my life I actually believed that too. Like, what a selfish thing to do. Think about the people you're leaving behind. But I have come to change my way of thinking about that and realize how incorrect I was. And you tell me if this is correct or not, or your thoughts on this, but someone who is hurting that desperately, it's not that they want to inflict pain on other people. They just don't want to feel the pain themselves anymore, and they don't see any other way out. So it's not the intention to be selfish.
Oh, 1,000. I mean, I love that you're bringing that up, and thank you for being honest about your own journey. And if I think we're all honest, we're all on that kind of same journey, because suicide is just such a it's such a heavy and such a difficult thing and that's part of the reason for the film, is trying to give people some language on how to talk about it, because it is heavy, and that's why actually most of us just avoid it, because it's just hard to reckon with. And if you're somebody who's never experienced that level of pain, now we've all had bad days, bad moments, bad seasons, but when folks are dealing with that level of kind of chronic depression, and if you've never had it, it is hard to empathize with. It's hard to kind of just understand. And so it is easy to, and I think those people who maybe say that it's selfish, that's coming from a place of pain too, right? They're just struggling with their own pain.
Right.
But I completely, I think that is the wrong way to look at it. And I think that kind of notion that is not new. I think that's been around for that kind of shame and moralizing of it. It's been around for a long time, and it's part of the reason why we're in the position we're in. But no, it is, I believe strongly that those folks are dealing with such debilitating pain. And, when I think about it through the lens of like what our brains are meant to do, one of the core things that our brain is supposed to do is actually protect us from pain. Like that's kind of like it's one of its default settings. And so in a lot of ways, I view this as actually kind of like a brain mix-up, that the brain is actually trying to relieve that person of pain. That pain is so overwhelming, and a lot of times they actually view themselves as, especially if they've been struggling with it for a while, as such a burden to those people that they love, that in some ways they might actually be, their brain might be telling themselves that people will be better off if they're not here, that people will feel a sense of relief once you're gone. There's a lot of tricks that our brain plays on us, particularly if we are struggling with something like depression. I really try to, when I was active in therapy and working with a lot of kids, I'd oftentimes try to get them to view their depression not as themselves, right, as this almost like other thing that is trying to play tricks on you, right? It's going to try to convince you to stay inside all day. It's going to try to convince you to ignore that phone call and ignore that text, because it wants you to stay stuck, and it kind of wants you to stay in that place. But no, I love that you shared that, and I hope more and more, and I think as a society we're getting there slowly but surely, but we need to keep on putting the pedal to the metal on getting away from this kind of shame stuff. It's not a selfish act, although I do strongly believe that that's not how people's story is supposed to end. So that's the other piece too. We're not we're not on the other side of like, there are some cultures and things that are kind of leaning into assisted suicide stuff. That's not where I go. I come from a place of I truly believe that suicide is not supposed to be the end to anybody's story. But if it is, that is a tragedy. And instead of kind of asking why or shame and blame, we should be asking how do we prevent the next one, and how do we keep leaning into each other, and how do we kind of just turn the tide on this issue. But I love that you shared that.
And I agree with what you said. It should not be the ending to anyone's story.
Right.
And while I'm sharing here, Matt, being honest, I will tell
please.
you, and my closest friends know this. I haven't talked about it publicly, but I'm feeling led to do so now in the vein of your documentary, and in, erasing the shame and the stigma about talking about struggles. And there was a time in my life, and, people look at me and they think, oh, like, you're so upbeat and positive and happy. And when my marriage fell apart unexpectedly, I did not know that on a Monday morning my husband was going to come in and say, I don't want to be married anymore. And I really didn't think I could recover from it. And when I say it now, I think people are probably going like, lots of people get divorced. What's the big deal? But what it did to me was, it shook me to my core.
Sure.
And I thought about taking my own life many times during the depression that followed, and the months that followed that. And where it scared me, how I just thought that was in my back pocket. That was because I didn't know how I could go on. I really didn't. And I also thought that I was a burden. I was a drag to be around. I wasn't any fun for my kids. I wasn't any fun for my friends. I was a shell of myself. And I think I feel the need to share that because, we make all these assumptions about people, and, if people in Charlotte know who I am, and again, they think I had this online persona or my TV persona. Like, no, life is, there's no friggin' easy button, man. There's no easy button. And I know what that is. I think, which is in part why I no longer say it's selfish when someone does that. I get it. I know what it feels to hurt that bad that you think maybe this is an option, which, thank the Lord in heaven, I never did. I went and got the help that I needed. I started taking antidepressants at the age of 50, for the first time in my life. And I did the things that I needed to do to get better. And I thank God every day that I'm here now. My life is so much different. And that's always the hope I wanted to give people, to say a new day will dawn. I know it doesn't seem like it when you're in the depths of your depression, but a new day will dawn, and that there is help out there.
Right.
So can you offer... I'm sorry, I'm totally like snot ugly crying now.
You're amazing. Now you're
I didn't think I was going to say this, but I feel compelled to.
Yes, thank you.
Given the nature of what your film is about. So, I hope that you can provide to people who maybe find themselves in a situation where they think, not even suicidal necessarily, but just their depression is so bad it's affecting every area of their life.
Yeah. Well, no, Colleen, thank you so much for going there.
Well, thank you. Producer Carlene is so sweet. She just gave me. She's the best. She's the best. I love her so much. Thank you.
Got to have the Kleenexes on standby
Thank
all
you.
the time. No, thank you. Because again, it's and even like what you're describing, suicide does not discriminate. Depression does not discriminate. It's not an age thing. It's not a fame thing. It's not a beauty thing. It's not a success thing. It's not a money thing. Like it just. Life is fraught with difficulty and tragedy, and again, our brains are complicated, and life is complicated, and life is hard, and that's where again I think, and I don't think we can get through this alone in any stretch. Like it's just life is so much better if we can do it together. So no, I think there's going to be so many people that resonate with what you just said. But yeah, ultimately, I am a hopeful person. I'm like, and I think there's. And I think there's a balance to strike where it's not like bumper sticker, high five hope, where it's like, hey, every day is awesome. Because every day is not awesome. And sometimes days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and months turn into a season that, oh my God, like how did, I wish we could not have to endure that. But genuinely, I do believe, like you just shared, that again, nobody's story is meant to end that way, and that there are brighter days ahead. And I also genuinely believe in how much good supports and hope and resources there are out there if people reach for it. It's that most people talk themselves out of even reaching for it at all, or say that, hey, that's for somebody else, or say, they might say, hey, I live in Ballantyne, I'm doing pretty well, I have too much, that kind of, somebody else needs a therapist, but not me. It's amazing how many people talk themselves out of that. And in my opinion, that's not themselves talk, that's actually the depression.
That's, like you were saying, the other entity is the depression, it's that talking.
Depression. The depression is tricking you into saying your thing's not bad enough to get help, but it's actually just wanting it to get worse. Because a lot of those things don't necessarily organically sometimes some things organically get better, naturally get better. Some things actually need like an intervention to really turn. So, but no, I do. There's so many there are more resources now for people to get help if they want it than ever before. There's just still, one of the data points that hasn't moved much is I think it's like 7 out of 10 people report resistance to reaching out for help because of stigma. That's pretty much been the stat for my entire life.
Yes, and that's why we're talking about this. That's why you're producing The Calm and the Storm. I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to take a break and come back with your final thoughts right after this.
You got it.
Matt, during the remainder of our time together, I would like you to talk about some of those resources. Let's go with here in the Charlotte area, since this is where we are. I know people can watch this and listen to this anywhere, but before the break, you mentioned there are real resources for people who are struggling. Yeah,
I know, absolutely. So one great place to start. So I'm actually on the board of NAMI Charlotte. And NAMI is a national nonprofit. It's like the largest nonprofit focused on mental health in the country. The Charlotte chapter is incredible. It's incredibly strong. And I always tell people, so New Hope, my day-to-day company is not the place to start. We're usually a place that maybe is after somebody's tried 10 or 15 different things. We're kind of downstream. NAMI is upstream. That's the perfect first call or first open door. They actually have like a drop-in resource center here in Charlotte where you can just walk in and say, I need help, I'm struggling. It could be mental health, could be substance abuse, it could be, I don't know, my family is just going through something.
And NAMI is spelled NAMI, just for everybody who wants to look that up.
They have a navigator program, because one of the challenges with the mental health system sometimes is insurance and coverage and who's going to pay for what. Yeah. That system stinks, I don't love it, but NAMI is free, it's a nonprofit, they have this amazing navigator program you can call and just kind of get linked to stuff. So they're a great one. Most of the time also they are run volunteers or their employees are folks who've gone through this themselves and kind of have that kind of lived authentic experience. So I would guarantee if you call any NAMI chapter in the country, you are not going to be met with judgment or shame, you're going to be met with open arms. So that's local. And then I would say on the national level, one of the big things we're trying to do with the film is raise the profile of 988. 988 is the National Crisis Hotline. It was passed 4 years ago. There was just a recent New York Times article that actually talked about how it is finally starting to gain some traction and it actually is having a bit of a dent in the youth suicide rate. But it is still not a household name. And our goal is to make that a household name. My 5-year-old, when I was 5, I knew call 911 if there's danger. I would love for my 5-year-old to grow up in a world where he knows call 911 if there's physical danger, call 988 if me or a friend is having a mental health episode. If that became that type of kind of cultural institution, I don't think it's like hyperbolic to say like we'd see thousands of lives saved every year. So if you're anywhere in the country, 988, you can even text them. It's a whole thing. Most of the young people who reach out to 988 reach out via text. Text, chat, call. But NAMI, anywhere in the Charlotte area, there's an amazing NAMI down in the Rock Hill, Fort Mill area. That's a great place to start if you just don't know how the heck do I plug in. But if you've at least identified, I need some support, which is the biggest first step. I need some support, and I'm going to be courageous and make some kind of phone call. Starting with NAMI is a great way to go. There's amazing providers. I've worked at amazing mental health providers. I could throw a football and hit 15 amazing therapists in Charlotte. Yeah. It's just about how do you get connected with them. That's right. Starting with NAMI is a really good place to go.
Oh, I hope that people are really listening and remember the 988. That's so powerful. Go to thecalmandthestorm.com if you would like to see the trailer to the documentary that Matt is talking about. It's I was hooked at the trailer. I mean, it's very powerful, and you can follow along there. You can follow on social media too if you'd like to keep abreast of that situation. Matt Simon, you are just delightful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. We just appreciate your time.
Oh, Colleen, thank you so much. Thanks for your sharing, and thanks for WCNC's, genuine interest and care for these issues. It's amazing.
I know. God bless this company. I'm not even, that sounded really butt kissy, but it wasn't meant to be. I'm just grateful that they allow me to come on and do this and talk about stuff like this.
It comes from an authentic place. It's really obvious.
I'm so grateful for that too. So anyway, we are rooting for you folks. Again, thanks for watching. If you know someone who could benefit from this episode, let them know and send them our way to WCNC Plus. Again, thanks to Matt, and thanks to all of you for joining us for another episode of Wake Up to Your Life. Until next time, take care. And again, I'm rooting for you.